What would you do if the very person who underestimated you, who cast you aside as if you were nothing, suddenly had to answer to you? This is the story of Layla Harper, a woman who was unfairly fired from her job only to return days later as the boss. But her journey wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, redemption, and uncovering the truth behind years of corruption. And trust me, the twists in this tale will leave you speechless. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more powerful tales like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the office as Layla Harper adjusted her glasses and focused on the final slide of her presentation. Numbers danced across her laptop screen, each one representing hours of painstaking research and strategic planning. The quarterly review was less than an hour away, and she was determined to leave no stone unturned. She glanced at the clock and took a deep breath. Her co-workers moved around her, chatting, typing, and printing. Last-minute documents, Layla could feel their energy, some nervous, some apathetic. But she tuned it all out. This presentation wasn't just another task. It was an opportunity to showcase her talent and move closer to the promotion she had been eyeing for months. "Harper, in my office," came a sharp voice from across the room. Layla looked up to see her manager, Mr. Colton, standing at the door of his office. His graying hair and crisp suit gave him an air of authority, but the coldness in his tone carried a sharper edge. She saved her work and grabbed her notebook, her stomach tightening as she walked toward him inside Mr. Colton's office. The atmosphere was as sterile as the man himself. His desk was spotless save for a single folder that sat between them. He didn't invite her to sit, so Layla remained standing and clutching her notebook about the presentation. He began leaning back in his chair and steepling his fingers. "It's fine, I suppose, but I think it lacks a certain polish." Leah blinked. She had spent weeks refining every detail. "Polish? Could you be more specific? I'd be happy to make adjustments." Mr. Colton smirked, a faint, condescending curl of his lips. "It's not something you can just adjust, Harper. It's about instinct vision. You either have it or you don't." Leah felt a flicker of anger but kept her expression neutral. "I've worked hard to align the proposal with the company's goals. If there's something I missed, I'd appreciate your guidance." His smirk deepened. "You're ambitious, Harper. I'll give you that, but ambition without finesse can only take you so far." It wasn't the first time he had undermined her work, but today the sting felt sharper. Leah held her ground, refusing to let him see the impact of his words. "I understand. I'll do my best to refine it." He waved her off, as though dismissing a waiter. "See that you do. You're excused." Minutes later, Layla sat in the conference room with the rest of the team. The tension in her chest hadn't eased, but she forced herself to focus as Mr. Colton began the meeting to kick things off. "I'd like to present the proposed strategy for our next quarter," he announced, clicking through the slides Leah had prepared. As the presentation unfolded, her frustration grew. He was taking credit for her work, not just the general framework, but specific ideas she had carefully crafted. He even used phrases from her notes verbatim, as if the concepts had sprung from his own mind. Her colleagues nodded in approval, offering praise that he accepted with an air of practiced humility. Leah clenched her jaw, her hands gripping the edges of her notebook. She wanted to speak up, to point out that those ideas were hers, but she knew how it would look. Calling him out in front of everyone would only paint her as confrontational, a label she had worked hard to avoid. The meeting ended with polite applause, and Layla returned to her desk, feeling drained. She was reviewing her notes when Mr. Colton's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Harper, a moment," he said, beckoning her back to his office. The walk to his office felt heavier this time. Something about his tone made her uneasy, and when she entered, the air felt colder. He gestured for her to sit a stark contrast to their earlier interaction. "I'll get straight to the point," he said, sliding a paper across the desk. "We've decided to terminate your employment effective immediately." Layla stared at the paper, her mind reeling. "Terminate Mr. Colton? I don't understand. My performance has been consistently strong. It's not about performance." He interrupted, his tone clipped. "It's about fit, and frankly, you're not a good fit for this team." Her breath caught in her throat. "Fit," she repeated. "What does that even mean?" "I've met every target, contributed to every project. This isn't personal," he said, though the smug look on his face told her otherwise. It's just business. She wanted to fight back, to demand an explanation that made sense, but she knew it was futile. His decision was made, and nothing she said would change it. Swallowing her pride, she stood, her hands trembling as she gathered her things, as she left the office carrying the contents of her desk in a cardboard box. Her co-workers avoided her gaze. Only Erica, a junior employee, whispered a quiet, "I'm so sorry," as Leah walked past. Outside, the cold wind bit at her cheeks as she stood on the sidewalk clutching the box to her chest. Tears threatened to spill, but she blinked them back. She refused to let Mr. Colton win. Not like this. This isn't the end, she thought, her resolve hardening. This is just the beginning. The drive home was a blur for Layla Harper. She barely registered the honking horns, the red and green flashes of traffic lights, all the bustling city streets. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white as she replayed the events of the day in her mind. Every word from Mr. Colton echoed louder in her ears, the sting of his condescension turning into a dull roar of frustration. By the time she reached her apartment, the weight of the injustice was unbearable. She set her box of belongings on the dining table, sank into a chair, and let the tears she had held back all day finally fall. They weren't tears of defeat. They were the kind of tears that came before a storm, fueled by a growing fire in her chest. Leah's phone buzzed its vibration, breaking the heavy silence in the room. She glanced at the screen. Her father, Malcolm Harper, was calling for a moment. She considered letting it go to voicemail, unwilling to explain what had happened. But then she thought about everything her father had taught her about resilience, about standing tall. In the face of adversity, she answered. "Hey, Dad," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Layla, how's my favorite daughter doing?" Malcolm's warm voice carried a hint of humor, as it always did. It was his way of brightening any conversation. Leah forced a chuckle. "Dad, I'm your only daughter, and you still manage to be my favorite," he quipped, but his tone shifted as he added, "You okay? You sound off." There was no hiding it from him. Layla sighed, her voice trembling as she said, "I got fired today." The line went silent for a moment. Then Malcolm's voice returned sharper, more protective. "What happened? Tell me everything." Layla hesitated, but eventually spilled the whole story. How Mr. Colton had stolen her ideas, dismissed her efforts, and then fired her without a valid reason as she spoke. The anger in her voice grew, each word a catharsis. When she finished, Malcolm let out a long breath. "I knew this was coming." Leah blinked. "What do you mean? I've been watching that branch for a while," he said, his tone heavy with disappointment. "It's been underperforming for years, and your manager, what's his name? Colton has been at the center of every complaint I've received. I wanted to intervene earlier, but you were determined to do this on your own because I wanted to prove I could." Leah said, her voice rising slightly. "I didn't want to be the CEO's daughter who gets everything handed to her, and you did prove it," Malcolm said firmly. "What happened today wasn't about you failing. It was about a broken system that allowed someone like Colton to thrive, and now it's time to fix that." Layla rubbed her temples. "What are you saying, Dad?" that I should just come back into the family business and let you fight my battles for me. No, Malcolm said, his voice calm but resolute. I'm saying you should fight this battle yourself with the resources and authority you deserve. This isn't about revenge, Layla. It's about justice, about showing people like Colton that they can't treat others like this and get away with it. What do you mean by authority? She asked cautiously. There was a pause before Malcolm said, I'm appointing you as the new Regional Operations Director effective immediately. Leah froze. Regional Operations Director, Dad. That's exactly what you're ready for, he interrupted. You've spent years proving yourself in this industry, and it's time you stepped into a role where you can make real change. You won't just be overseeing your old branch. You'll be overseeing every branch in the region. The weight of his words settled over her. It was an enormous opportunity, one that could redefine her career, but it also felt like a risk. She had always wanted to succeed on her own terms, without the shadow of her father's legacy hanging over her. Think about it, Layla, Malcolm said gently. This isn't about taking a shortcut. It's about using the power you've earned to make things right that night. Leah couldn't sleep. She paced her small apartment, her mind racing with possibilities. The humiliation of her firing still burned fresh in her memory, but now it was accompanied by something else, a sense of purpose. She thought about Erica's quiet apology, the way her co-workers had avoided her days as she walked out. She had been wronged. Yes, but she wasn't the only one. The branch was rife with favoritism and inequality, and she was in a position to change that, not just for herself, but for everyone who had suffered under Mr. Colton's leadership. By morning, Leah had made her decision. She called her father back. Okay, she said, her voice steady. I'll do it. But I want to handle this my way. I wouldn't expect anything less. Malcolm said, pride evident in his tone. I'll send over the official paperwork today. And Leah, yeah, show them what you're made. Of Leah's first visit to the branch as Regional Operations Director was intentionally low-key. She didn't announce her new role to the staff, choosing instead to pose as a regional auditor conducting a routine review. She wanted to see the office through unfiltered eyes, to observe the dynamics without the veil of formality. As she walked through the halls, memories of her time there came flooding back. The break room, where she had shared laughs with co-workers, the corner desk, where she had spent countless late nights, and of course the conference room, where her ideas had been stolen and dismissed. She noticed subtle but telling details, the way certain employees avoided eye contact with Mr. Colton, the strain. Smiles on others' faces, the whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when he entered the room. The toxicity was palpable in the hallway. Leah crossed paths with Erica, the junior employee who had sent her the cryptic message. Erica froze, her eyes widening in recognition. Leah. She whispered, "What are you doing here?" Leah smiled softly, just conducting an audit. "How have you been?" Erica hesitated, glancing around nervously. "It's been the same, worse. Maybe after you left. Mr. Colton became even more. Don't worry." Layla interrupted, placing a reassuring hand on Erica's arm. "Things are going to change." Erica looked at her, hope flickering in her eyes. Are you really here to help?" Leah's expression hardened, her determination clear. "I'm not just here to help, Erica. I'm here to make things right." The week Leah spent observing her old workplace was eye-opening. It was one thing to suspect systemic issues, but it was another to see them unfold in real-time. Lay's disguised role as a regional auditor allowed her to witness the subtle, yet insidious dynamics that had permeated the office. She saw how Mr. Colton commanded the room with false confidence, his authority built on fear and manipulation. She noticed how certain employees, those who curried favor with him, were given preferential treatment, while others, especially minority staff members, were sidelined or outright ignored. The toxicity wasn't just a symptom of Mr. Colton's leadership. It was the foundation of the branch's culture each day. Leah quietly took notes, recording her observations and gathering testimonies from employees who trusted her enough to speak. Erica was her most valuable ally. The junior employee had a keen eye for detail and an almost encyclopedic memory of the branch's misdeeds. Mr. Colton's been covering up his mistakes for years. Erica whispered one afternoon, sliding a folder across Leah's desk. These are just a few examples: altered performance reviews, inflated budgets, and this. Lee opened the folder and found a series of emails between Mr. Colton and another manager. The correspondence detailed how Colton had manipulated numbers to secure bonuses while blaming poor performance on lower-level staff. Leah's jaw tightened. "This is worse than I thought." Erica nodded. "I've been holding on to this for months. I didn't know who to trust." Until now, Leah placed a reassuring hand on Erica's shoulder. "You did the right thing. This is exactly what I need to take him down." The day of Layla's reveal began like any other. The office hummed with activity, employees hurrying to meet deadlines under Mr. Colton's watchful eye. Leah spent the morning finalizing her report, compiling every piece of evidence she had gathered into a comprehensive dossier. By the time she stepped into the conference room for the mandatory meeting, her heart was pounding with anticipation. The staff filed in, slowly, murmurs of curiosity filling the air. Mr. Colton arrived last, his usual smugness on full display. "What's this about?" he asked, addressing no one in particular as he leaned against the door's frame. Leah stood at the head of the table, her expression calm and composed. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, I've been conducting a thorough audit of this branch over the past week. Today, I'll be sharing my findings." Mr. Colton scoffed and took a seat, his arms crossed. "Let's hope this doesn't take too long. We have actual work to do." Leah ignored the remark. She opened her laptop and projected a detailed report onto the screen. The room fell silent as she began her presentation, her voice steady and authoritative. Layla started with the numbers highlighting discrepancies in the branch's performance metrics. Then she moved on to employee feedback sharing, anonymous testimonies that painted a damning picture of favoritism, intimidation, and unethical behavior. "As you can see," Leah said, clicking to the next slide, "these issues are not isolated incidents. They are part of a broader pattern that has persisted under the current leadership." Mr. Colton sat up straighter, his face reeing. "Are you implying that I'm responsible for this?" he demanded. Leah met his gaze unflinching. "I'm not implying anything, Mr. Colton. The evidence speaks for itself." She clicked to the final slide, a series of emails and financial records that exposed Colton's manipulations. In black and white gasps rippled through the room as employees realized the extent of his deceit. "This is outrageous," Mr. Colton exclaimed, rising to his feet. "These accusations are baseless." Leah calmly folded her arms. "If that's the case, you'll have no problem explaining these documents to corporate. They've already been sent for review." As the murmurs grew louder, Leah raised a hand to quiet the room. "There's one more thing I'd like to share." She stepped forward, her gaze sweeping across the room. "For those who don't already know, my name is Leah Harper. I'm not just a regional auditor. I'm your new regional operations director." The room erupted into shocked whisper. "E.S." Mr. Colton's face turned ashen, his bravado crumbling as the weight of her words sank in. "I've been tasked with addressing the systemic issues in this branch." Leah continued, her voice firm. "That includes holding leadership accountable for their actions." Mr. Colton tried to recover, forcing a laugh. "You think you can just waltz in here and take over? You don't know what it takes to run this place." Leah stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his. I know enough to see that you've been running this place into the ground, and I know that your time here is over." The fallout was swift. Layla submitted her report to corporate, who wasted no time reviewing the evidence. Within hours, Mr. Colton was called into a private meeting with the regional HR director. When he emerged, his face was pale and his hands trembled as he packed his belongings as he left the office. Escorted by security, Layla watched from her new office window. The irony wasn't lost on her. Just days ago, she had been the one walking out with a box in her arms, but today she stood tall, her head held high. Erica knocked on the door, her expression a mix of awe and gratitude. "You really did it," she said softly. Leah turned to her with a small smile. "This is just the beginning, Erica. We have a lot of work to do." And for the first time in weeks, Leah felt something she hadn't dared to: hope for peace. Mr. Colin was gone, but more importantly, she was back, and this time she was in charge. Leah stood in her new office, the sunlight streaming through the tall glass windows. The space, once cold and sterile under Mr. Colton's rule, now felt like a sanctuary of possibility. A single vase of lies sat on her desk. Their vibrant white petals a choir declaration of renewal. Yet beneath the calm exterior, Leah's mind churned. Removing Mr. Colton was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, rebuilding trust and transforming a fractured workplace into one that thrived on fairness and respect. The day after Mr. Colton's departure, Leah called for a staff-wide meeting. She stood at the front of the room, the air thick with anticipation. Employees whispered among themselves, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. Leah let the room settle before speaking, "Good morning, everyone." She began, her voice steady but warm. "Yesterday marked a turning point for this branch. Moving forward, we will create a workplace where every voice is valued, every contribution is recognized, and fairness is not just a word, but a standard we uphold." She paused, scanning the room. Some employees nodded in agreement, while others, particularly those who had benefited from Mr. Colton's favoritism, remained skeptical. Leah expected resistance. Change was never easy. "I know trust has been broken here," she continued, "and I won't pretend that it can be repaired overnight. But I promise you this: I will do everything in my power to ensure that what happened under the previous leadership will never happen again." The murmurs died down, replaced by a contemplative silence. Leah felt flicker of hope. She had planted the seed. Now it was time to nurture it. Over the next few days, Leah began meeting with employees individually. These one-on-one conversations were crucial, not just to understand the damage caused by Mr. Colton's leadership, but also to uncover the invisible struggles that had been swept under the rug. One meeting with Ira stood out. The junior employee who had been instrumental in exposing Mr. Colton's corrupt ion sat across from Layla with a nervous energy. "I still can't believe he's gone," Erica admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "For years, I thought nothing would ever change." Leah nodded. "Change is hard, Erica, but people like you made it possible. Your courage was the turning point." Erica hesitated before speaking again. "There's something else you should know. It's about Greg." Greg, a senior staff member who had been one of Mr. Colton's most vocal supporters, had avoided Layla since the transition. Erica explained how Greg had actively participated in Colton's schemes, not just out of loyalty, but to secure his own promotions. "He's not as innocent as he seems," Erica said, "but he's not all bad either. I think he was scared of losing his job if he didn't go along with it." Leah leaned back in her chair, considering Erica's words. Greg's actions couldn't be ignored, but if fear had driven him, perhaps there was a path to redemption. Leah called Greg into her office later that afternoon. The man entered hesitantly, his usual confidence replaced by a wary demeanor. "Have a seat, Greg," Liu said, motioning to the chair across from her desk. He sat down, fidgeting with his hands. If this is about Colton, this is about you, Leah interrupted, her tone firm, but not unkind. I've reviewed the reports. I know you played a role in some of the decisions that harmed this branch. Greg's face rained, and he opened his mouth to speak. But Layla held up a hand. Before you defend yourself, let me ask you something. Why? Greg hesitated, his gaze dropping to his hands. I was just trying to survive, he admitted finally. Colton had power. He could make or break anyone here. I didn't agree with everything he did, but I couldn't risk my career. Leah studied him for a moment. Survival is one thing, Greg. Complicity is another. You have had a choice, and you chose to stand by, while others suffered. I know, Greg said, his voice barely above a whisper, and I regret it. I really do. Leia leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. Regret is a start, but it's not enough. If you want to make this right, you'll need to prove it. Greg nodded, his expression earnest. Tell me what to do. I'll do anything. Leah tasked Greg with leading a new mentorship program, pairing experienced employees with junior staff to foster collaboration and mutual support. It was a test not just of his leadership, but of his willingness to rebuild trust with the team. At first, the skepticism was palpable. Employees were wary of Greg's sudden change in behavior, but as weeks passed, he began to earn their respect. He worked tirelessly, often staying late to ensure the program's success. Slowly, the walls began to come down. One afternoon, Erica approached Leah with a tentative smile. Greg's different, she said. Hin's really trying. Leah nodded, her own smile softening. Sometimes people just need a second chance. With the mentorship program in place, Leah turned her attention to broader changes she implemented. Transparent performance evaluation criteria, ensuring that promotions and raises were based on merit rather than favor ISM. She also introduced diversity training workshops, creating a space for employees to learn and grow together. The results were immediate and profound. Employee morale improved, and the branch's performance metrics began to climb. For the first time in years, the office felt alive, not with fear, but with possibility. One evening, long after most of the staff had gone home, Leah sat at her desk reviewing the latest quarterly report. The numbers were impressive, but what filled her with the most pride was the feedback from employees. I finally feel like my work matters. This branch is unrecognizable in the best way possible. Leah Harper is the leader we needed. Leah leaned back in her chair, a sense of peace washing over her. Justice had been served not just for her, but for everyone who had endured the darkness of Mr. Colton's reign. And while the journey was far from over, she knew she had set the branch on a path toward lasting change. As she locked up for the night, she glanced at the lies on her desk, their petals glowing softly in the moonlight. They were a reminder of the power of renewal, of the beauty that could emerge from even the harshest of trials. And as she walked out into the cool night air, Leah felt ready for whatever came next. Leah arrived at the office early the next morning, the stillness of the building reflecting the calm. Before the rush of the workday, today was a significant day, not just for her, but for everyone in the branch. The leadership audit she had commissioned weeks ago was complete, and she was ready to present the results. The report was thorough, detailing systemic issues that had festered for years and laying out a clear roadmap for sustainable change. As she reviewed her notes in her office, there was a knock on the door. Erica peeked in her expression, a mix of excitement and nervousness. They're all in the conference room, she said. Ready when you are. Leah nodded. Thank you, Erica. Let's do this. The conference room was packed with employees from all levels of the branch. For many of them, this meeting felt different. There was no tension, no undercurrent of fear. Instead, There was anticipation, a sense that something important was about to unfold. Layla stood at the front of the room, her presence commanding yet approachable. She began by acting the challenges the branch had faced over the past few weeks. I've had the privilege of hearing your stories, your concerns, and your ideas. She said, I've learned about the incredible talent and resilience in this team, as well as the obstacles that have held us back. She clicked to the first slide of her presentation, which displayed key findings from the audit. The room grew silent as she outlined the issues: favoritism, lack of transparency, and a culture that stifled innovation. These problems didn't appear overnight. Leah continued, and they won't disappear overnight either. But we have the power to change this together. Her voice carried conviction as she moved to the next slide, detailing the proposed reforms: equitable evaluation processes, mentorship programs, and new policies to ensure accountability at all levels of leadership. When Leah finished, she opened the floor for questions and feedback. At first, there was hesitation, but slowly hands began to rise. A middle-aged employee named Sarah, who had worked at the branch for over a decade, spoke first. I've been here long enough to see a lot of promises made and broken. What makes this time different? Leah met Sarah's gaze because this time the changes are being driven by all of us. Not just leadership, the policies we're implementing are the result of your input. And if anyone, including myself, fails to uphold these standards, there will be consequences. Her words resonated one by one. Employees began sharing their thoughts, their ideas, and their hopes for the future. It was the first time many of them felt truly heard, and the energy in the room shifted from skepticism to cautious optimism. As the meeting wrapped up, the door to the conference room opened, and Malcolm Harper stepped inside. His presence was a surprise, and a ripple of whispers spread through the room. Leah's father rarely made unannounced visits, but his timing felt intentional. Malcolm smiled warmly, his gaze sweeping across the team. I wanted to see for myself what my daughter has accomplished, he said. And I have to say, I'm impressed. He turned to Layla, his pride evident. You've taken a difficult situation and turned it into an opportunity for growth. That's the kind of leadership this company needs. Leah felt a swell of emotion but maintained her composure. Thank you, Dad, but this isn't just my success. It's a team effort. Later that day, Layla held a private meeting with the employees who had been most affected by Mr. Colton's leadership. Among them was a young man named Daniel, who had been unfairly passed over for a promotion, despite his stellar performance. I want to thank you for staying, Leah said to him. I know it wasn't easy. Daniel nodded his expression. Ernest, I stayed because I believed things could get better, and now for the first time it feels like they are. Layla smiled. They are, and your promotion, it's long overdue. Congratulations. Daniel's eyes widened in surprise and gratitude. Thank you, this means a lot. Meanwhile, Greg continued to prove his commitment to redemption. He had embraced his role in the mentorship program, building trust with employees who had once resented him. Leah kept a close eye on his progress, watching as he began to transform from a follower to a leader. One afternoon, Greg approached Leah in her office. I want to thank you for giving me a second chance. He said, I know I didn't deserve it, but I'm doing everything I can to earn it. Layla nodded, her tone both firm and encouraging. You're doing well, Greg, but remember, earning trust takes time. Stay consistent, and the team will come around. Greg's gratitude was evident. I will thank you. By the end of the month, the branch had undergone a remarkable transformation. Employee morale was at an all-time high, and performance metrics reflected the positive changes. Layla's leadership had not only repaired the damage caused by Mr. Colton, but also set a new standard for what the workplace could be. On her last evening in the office before a well-deserved break, Leah stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. Erica joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You did it," Erica said, handing her one of the cups. Layla took a sip, savoring the moment. "We did it. This is just the beginning." As they stood there, the sounds of laughter and conversation from the team echoed through the halls. It was a sound Leah hadn't heard in this office before, a sound that signaled hope, unity, and the promise of a brighter future. If you like this story, please like this video and subscribe my channel.